Welcome to my channel Code View and Talk. This video is going to be about MySQL interview questions. So if you are preparing for database interview and you don't have any idea like what type of questions are asked from the database, then this video is going to be very important for you. So watch the video till end. So let me start with my first question in database. So the first question is, what is difference between inner join, left join, right join and full auto join? So right, joins are used to fetch the data from two tables when we have a relationship between two tables. So the joins are used to fetch the data. So we have a different type of join. So we have inner joins. So returns only the rows with matching value in both the tables. Then we have a left joins. Returns all the rows from the left tables and matching rows from the right tables. Non-matching rows from the right table will have null values. And then we have a right join. It is similar to the left join, but only difference is that it returns all the rows from the right table and matching rows from the left table. And then we have full outer join, which returns all the rows when there is a match in one of the tables. So MySQL requires union to simulate this. So this was the first question where I discussed about different type of joins in the database. So this question is most of the time it is asked in the interview, like interviewer ask about the joins whether you are aware of or not. Next question is, so we have a different type of clause in the SQL, so you should be knowing the which clause is used for what purpose. So here the second question which I have taken is like, what is difference between where and having clause in the SQL? So these clauses are used for different purpose. So where clause filters rows before any grouping is done, like you can use with select, insert, update and delete command. And having is used to filter the rows after grouping is done. So typically used with aggregate function. So like aggregate functions such as like count, sum, etc. So you should be knowing like what is the purpose of these clauses when we write the MySQL query. So that will help you to write the query of your questions. So this was my second questions. Now let's move on to the third questions. So third question is, explain the difference between delete, truncate and drop. So third question is, explain the difference between delete, truncate and drop in SQL. So these are the commands which are used for the different purposes. So delete removes rows from a table, but it is slower than truncate because it logs individual row deletions and can be rolled back if in a transaction. And if you talk about truncate, it removes all the rows from a table without logging individual row deletion. Hence, it is faster and it cannot be rolled back. And the third is drop, which will delete the entire table, including its structure and data. So it is irreversible. So these commands are used in terms of removing the records from a table, but every command has a different purpose to use. So you should be knowing like when to use which command, like delete, truncate and drop. Next question is, what is difference between group by and distinct in SQL? So this is another two clauses I would say which are used, and group by is very important. Like you will be using many places group by when you write the query. So you should be knowing like why group by is being used. So group by groups rows sharing the same values into the summary rows. So it is used for that purpose. And next is distinct. So distinct is nothing but it eliminates duplicate row from the result set. So let's say you have a table and you have a multiple duplicate value in that, and you want only to get the distinct value out of that. So in that case you can use this distinct keyword. And then fifth question is, what is the use of the limit clause in the MySQL? So this is another very important when you have a huge data set and you want not to get whole data set in the result set. You want only the few result in the data set. So in that case you can limit the result in the query, so you can use the limit clause there. So the limit clause is used to specify the number of rows returned by a query. It is typically used to limit the number of rows in a select queries. So let's say when I write limit 5, it will only return the first 5 rows in the result set. Then the sixth question is, what is an index and how does it improve query performance? So when you are preparing for the database interview, then questions related to the performance is very necessary. Like it is always and often being asked, like how will you improve your performance? So index is one of the way where the performance is getting improved. So let's know about what is index and how can we improve the query performance. So an index is a data structure that improves the speed of a data retrieval operation on a database table. So if you create an index, it makes data retrieval faster. So it is typically created on a columns that are frequently used in where and join or order by clauses. So indexes speed up the data search operation but can slow down data insertion, deletion and updates. So we should also be knowing about like where to use the index. This can only be helpful in a search operation, but it can slow down your performance when you are trying to insert the data or delete a data or update a data. So let's know more about it, because it makes searching easier for us when we are trying to search a data, and let's say we are getting more response time. So in that case we can create an index on that particular column so that it can search on only that index column, and it will make your query performance better. So next question is, what is auto increment keyword used in MySQL? So it is self-explanatory, like auto increment. So auto increment is used to automatically generate a unique number for a column. So usually when we have a primary key, right, we want like that primary key gets generated automatically. So what auto increment does, that it will automatically generate a unique number for you. So when we have a primary key, we use that auto increment keywords, so we don't have to worry about the generation of the primary key. It will increment the value by 1 for each new row inserted. So for that purpose auto increment keyword is used. Then what is the view in a MySQL and what are its advantages? So view is a virtual table in MySQL that is defined by a query, and it is used to simplify complex queries, hide sensitive data, and encapsulate logic. And the advantage of view in MySQL is that it simplifies complex queries, improves security, and provides abstraction. Next question is, how would you retrieve unique records from a table in a MySQL? So people also ask in the interview that you have a, as I was told, right, duplicate records, and you want to retrieve only the unique records from the table. So in that case, you can use the distinct keyword to retrieve the unique records. So here, see, I have given example also where you can see that I have used distinct keyword in select statement, like select distinct column 1, column 2 from table name. So this will return you a distinct record from the table. Next question is, how can you improve the performance of a slow SQL query? So let's say I have a query and that is not performing well, like it is slower. So I want to improve the performance of that SQL query. So what will you do in order to improve the performance? So you can take few ways by which you can improve the query performance. So first is like you can create indexes on frequently queried columns. As I've already discussed the indexes before. Then you can use optimized joins by reducing the number of rows involved. That can also help you to improve the performance. Use explain to understand the query execution plan, and avoid using select a star. Specify only the necessary columns. So when you use star, right, it will bring whole records in the data set. That can also help, that can also lead you to slow performance. So always specify necessary columns which are needed in the result set, and then use limit to reduce the result set. I have already told the purpose of limit. And then you can also use the query caching, so that can also help you to improve the performance. So these are the few ways by which you can play around with the query to improve the performances of that query. So my 11th question is, what are subqueries in MySQL and what type of subquery exist? So a subquery is a query nested inside another query, and the type of subquery includes single row subquery. Single row subquery returns a single value. Then we have multiple row subquery that will return a multiple rows. Then we have multiple column subquery, returns multiple columns. And the last is correlated subquery, references columns from the outer query. So these were the type of subquery which exist in the MySQL database. Let's move on to the next question. So the next question is, what is self join, and can you provide an example? So when we talk about join, right, we have already talked about the types of join, but there is another type of join which is self join. So self join is used when a table is joined with itself. So in other joins, right, we join between two tables, but when we talk about the self join, it is joined with itself. Like there will be only one table and we will be joining the same table with the self join. So let's say in the example you can see here, right, I have a employee table. So let's say here I am writing that select e1.emp name, e2.emp name as manager from employee e1, and then I'm doing join on the same table. Let's see here again, employee table, right, and we are just giving uh, referring that second instance of the employee table with e2, and the first instance of the employee table is e1, and then we are doing joins on both the table. So here you see how we are joining. So we are using on e1 dot manager id equal to e2 dot emp id. So you see how we have used here in the example self join. We are joining the same table. Like here we have only one table which is employee, and we are joining with the employee table only. It's just that we are giving the references difference. So we have a first reference which is e1 and second is e2, and on that we are just joining the same table. So this is how we will be using the self join. And the next question is, what are the different types of indexes in MySQL, and we when would you use each? So we have already talked about the indexes, like what is indexes and why indexes is used. So now let's talk about the different type of indexes. So we have primary index, which is unique, non-null values and used for primary key. Then we have a unique index. It ensures uniqueness of the indexed column. And then we have a full text index used for full text searches, and then we have b-tree index, the default index type, and then we have hash index, so fast but only for the exact matching. So these are the different types of indexes in the MySQL, and I have already told when to use what. So you can think of, like, when anybody asks like what are the different type of indexes, you should be able to give the answer. And the next question is, what is explain keyword in MySQL and how would you use it to optimize queries? So explain is a keyword in the MySQL that provides information about how MySQL query executes a query. So let's say you are executing a query to get the result set and you want to know the how this query is getting executed, you can use this explain keywords. So it will help you to identify inefficient operation like full table scans, which can be optimized by adding indexes or adjusting the query. So this is used for getting the inefficient operation. And when we talk about the database, right, so normalization and denormalization is very important. So you should be knowing the concept of normalization and denormalization, and what what are the pros and cons. So normalization is the process of organizing the data to reduce redundancy and improve integrity. It involves dividing large tables into a smaller ones and using foreign keys. So how it will divide that large table into the smaller one? Because we'll be dividing the large table into a smaller table and we will be using that foreign key to reference. So what are the pros and cons? Like, pros is reduced data redundancy, easier updates, and cons may require more complex queries. So basically it helps you to reduce the redundancy in the data. So for that purpose normalization is very important. And denormalization is the process of combining normalized tables to reduce joins complexity. And the pros of denormalization is it is a faster read, simplified queries, and cons will be the data redundancy and complex updates. Next question is, what is composite index? So a composite index is an index that include more than one column. Normally we index on a single column, but sometimes based on the requirement we also have to create an index which will involve more than one column. So in that case you will have to use that composite index. So it helps to speed up the queries that filter on multiple columns. As I said, right, when you want to create an index on multiple column, you will have to use this composite index. Next, what is difference between rank and dense rank? So these are the two window function which are very important, and this is mostly asked. It may be like interviewer is not asking directly about the rank and dense rank, but he may ask with the different queries where you will be using this rank and dense rank function. And there is another also called row number, that is also very handy window function. So rank function is used for assigning the same rank to the identical values, and it will skip the next rank if the value is same for two rows. But in dense rank it does not skip the rank even if there are ties. Next, what are transaction in MySQL, and explain the ACID properties. So this is very important questions from the database point of view, like what is transaction and what is ACID properties. So transaction is a sequence of operation that are treated as a single unit, and the ACID properties are, so ACID property stands for atomicity, consistency, isolation, and durability. So we will see one by one like what is atomicity. So atomicity by definition, right? So atomicity ensures that transaction is treated as a single individual unit. What does it means? It means either all the operation within the transaction are executed or none of them are executed. So here I have given you the example also. Let's see. So let's say you have a bank account, and if a bank transfer involves deducting money from one account to and adding it to the another account. So both the action must be either succeed together or fail together. If the money is deducted but not added to other account, the transaction is considered incomplete and must be rolled back. Next is consistency. So consistency ensures that transaction brings the database from one valid state to another valid state, maintaining the integrity of the database. So the database must adhere to predefined rules, constraints, and relationship both before and after the transaction. So in the example, you see if the database has a rule that an account balance cannot be negative, so a transaction that try to withdraw more money than is available in the account should be rejected, ensuring the database remain consistent. Next is isolation. So isolation ensures that operation of one transaction are isolated from the operation of other concurrent transaction. Even if multiple transactions occur simultaneously, each transaction should execute as if it is were the only transaction happening at that moment. So if two people try to withdraw money from the same account at the same time, isolation ensures that final balance reflect both withdrawals correctly without interference between the transaction. And the last is durability. So durability guarantees that once a transaction is committed, its changes are permanent, even if in the event of a system failure. So failure like a crash or power outage, the data is safely stored and can be recovered. So let's say after a transaction that transfer money between account is successfully completed, the changes are saved in the database. Even if the system crashes immediately afterwards, the changes are still intact upon recovery. So these were the ACID properties. Again, I am telling that this is very important from the database point of view. You should be very clear about each properties in the ACID properties, like why it is being used and what purpose of each property in that. So next question is, what are the isolation label? Like these are the advanced concept in the database, but if you are experienced, you will be asked this type of question in the database. So there are mainly four isolation level in most relational database management system, and they control the potential problem that can arise when multiple transactions are happening concurrently. So the four isolation level are like, first is read uncommitted. So in this isolation level, transactions are allowed to read data that has been modified but not yet committed by other transaction. So this can lead to problem like dirty reads. So what do you mean by dirty reads? Reading data that might be rolled back. So you can see that what could be the possible problem here. It dirty read, when I say dirty read, like a transaction reads data that another transaction has written but has not yet committed. So if the other transaction roll back, the data read will be never actually existing. So example here I have given, you see if a transaction A is updating a balance and transaction B reads that balance before A commits a rollback, B might see inconsistent data. So use case used when performance is more critical than data consistency. So the application can tolerate potential inconsistencies. And the second is read committed. So this level ensures that transaction can only read data that has been committed. It prevents dirty reads but still allows non-repeatable reads. So where a value might change between two reads within the same transaction. So possible problem is non-repeatable reads. If a transaction reads a value, another transaction modifies that value before the first transaction completes. The first transaction might read different value if it queries the same data again. You can check the example here. I'll just move to the next so that video does not get more long. uh, Third is repeatable read. So this isolation level guarantee that if a transaction reads a value, it will get the same value if it reads the data again later in the same transaction. So this prevents dirty reads, non-repeatable reads, but can still allow phantom reads, where a new row are inserted or deleted by other transaction during the transaction. So in the repeatable reads, it prevents from the dirty reads and non-repeatable reads, but it allows phantom reads, which is nothing but a transaction read a set of rows based on a query, but another transaction inserts or delete or update rows, causing the result of the same query to be different in different part of the transaction. So this is third, which is a repeatable read. And the last is serializable. So this is the highest isolation level, where transactions are executed in such a way that if they run serially one after another without any overlap, it prevents dirty reads, non-repeatable reads, and phantom reads. So possible problem is none. It prevents all types of anomalies, but it can cause the most performance overhead due to strict locking. So these were the four isolation level which are very important. You should be knowing all of them very well so that you should be able to answer in the interview when it is asked from interviewer. So you can see that in the summary I have given like what are the summary of the isolation level. You can see that in read committed, dirty reads is allowed, non-repeatable reads allowed, and phantom read allowed. Read committed where dirty reads is not allowed, non-repeatable is allowed, and phantom is allowed. Repeatable read where dirty read is not allowed, then non-repeatable is not allowed, but phantom read is allowed. And in serializable, nothing is allowed, neither a dirty read nor non-repeatable read and phantom reads. So these were the summary of the isolation level. Now let's move on to the some query problem, where in the interview most of the time these queries are being asked. So you should be knowing like how to write the query for this. So my query here is like, how can you find the second highest salary from the employee table? So let's understand the query first. You have a table of employee which has some data, and you want to get the second highest salary from that table. So there are multiple ways by which you can get the second highest salary. I'll just discuss one by one. So you can use subquery to get the second highest salary also. So the first solution which I have written here is with using subquery. So you see I am just selecting a max query, select max EMP salary as second highest salary from employee, where EMP salary less than, again I have a query like which is a subquery, select max EMP salary from employee. So first this query will run, which is subquery, and will bring the max salary from the employee table, and then we will find the again max salary from the employee table which is less than this max salary which came from the subquery. So this will give you the second highest salary in the employee table. You can also use limit to use that second highest salary. So you can just use another query. You can see here I have just written select star from employee, you group by salary, and then order by salary in descending order. Then you can limit the and one by one. So this query will also give you the second highest salary. Next is delete duplicate record in a table. So most of the time people ask like, you have a duplicate records, and delete the duplicate records and keep only one distinct record available in the table. So how will you do that? So again here we have a different type of different way of deleting it, and there are two types of questions which becomes in this delete duplicate records in a table. One is like when you have whole data in table are duplicated, like there is no primary key, so you even the id is also duplicate. So in that case, how will you do? Whole record is duplicate. You can just create a temporary table and you can create a distinct record from that table. So you can do like this. First query which you will run is this create table temp table as select distinct star from your table. So this will create a temporary table with the distinct record. Then you drop your original table and then rename the temporary table to your original table name. So this will delete all the duplicate record and will only keep the one instance of each duplicated record in the table. So that is one way. But the second version of the same question is, let's say you have to delete a duplicate record when id is a primary key. So here, since id is a primary key, id cannot be the same. So here you will have some column in the table which are duplicated. So you have to first identify the column on which you say that these record in the table are duplicated. So how will you use that? How will you write the delete query for that? So you can use join in order to delete the duplicated record. So let's see, delete t1 from your table name, whatever is the table name t1, and then join your table t2. And you can, since I said right, you have to identify the column on which you are saying that your record is duplicated. So here you see, on all the column where I have identified, we will just use in the join. So t1 dot name is equal to t2 dot name and t1 dot email is equal to t2. This question is find highest salary of each department in a table. So you are given some data in a table and you have salary as well, and you want to find the highest salary for each department. So that you can achieve with the group by clause. So you just right select department id and then max salary as highest salary from employee, group by department id. So what it will do, it will group the data based on the department id, and out of that it will get the max salary. So this will give you the max salary for each department. Because it involves the data in only one table, so here we are not using the joins. But this query also has a second version where you have to find the highest salary in each department, which will also include the employee details, which will have in the different table. So for that the query will be little different. So here you will be using join because we have two tables, one is employee and other is department, and some data is in the department table and some data is in the employee table. So we'll be using join in order to get the highest salary of each department. So let's see how the query will look like. So select e dot employee id and e dot department id, e dot salary, e dot name, and d dot department name from employee e, and the other table is department d. And then we are using join on field like e dot department id is equal to d dot department id, and then where e dot salary is equal to, we have a inner query where we are finding that select max salary from employee where department id is equal to e dot department id, and then we are doing order by with e dot department id. So this will give you the detail of from employee table also and some detail from the department table also with the highest salary on each department. So these were the MySQL database question which I have discussed in this video, is going to be very important from the database interview point of view. So practice well and this might help you to clear the database interview. And my last question is, what are the horizontal and vertical partitioning? So here I am not giving the answer of this question in the video. This is the question for the Viewers, this is the question for you who is watching this video. Let me know the answer of this question in the comments. That this video is going to be very helpful who are preparing for the database interview. Thank you. I'll see you in the next video.